Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the rec yard every Wednesday night. Hey. Keep on, Toonche. Keep on. And we do need to make a good intro, because we're cooler than that intro. I realize that.
Honey, I love it. It's professional, and I want you to have a high-paying salary as a social media person at a corporation, because it's spot on professional. I don't think it captures I don't think it quite captures how rowdy we get here on the rec yard.
But did you see the ladies on the rec yard?
I did. I saw it. saw it.
Because I can play it again if I need to. If you missed, no? Okay, well, Shaquille's already here, and we're so happy. Hi, Shaquille. Hi, Stephen. Good evening, guys. Melanie from Oklahoma's here. Ginger's here. You guys, we're so happy to see everybody. Rayanne, thanks for joining us on the rec yard. We are live here every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I am Marci Marie.
And I'm Toonche.
Toonche. Oh, Toonche, somebody asked me where you got your name, and obviously your last name is Toon, so right. It's a play on that.
It has more to do with Toonche. It's spelled a different way for Lil Wayne, but it's Toonche after Lil Wayne. I had a notorious reputation in prison, and so they nicknamed me after Lil Wayne.
Did they really? I love that.
Well, Diane did. She took my last name, and then I had no idea Lil Wayne's nickname was Toonche, but it is. So it's kind of a mashup of both of those things. So that's where Toonche came from.
And you rode that nickname through your entire incarceration, or
the second one? The second 10 years. The first 10 years was Woody. From the little cowboy from Toy Story.
I can see that. Mm-hmm. I wish that you would dress up as Woody when it gets closer to Halloween. I'm not
doing that.
I can be Buzz Lightyear.
You know what? That would be a pretty good show, though.
Yeah,
I'd be Woody and you can be Buzz Lightyear.
And we can talk about Halloweens in the penitentiary, because we had some Halloween parties and we made some pretty killer costumes.
We did.
So that's for another day, right?
You must have been, I was wearing my Camp Crystal Lake shirt right now. So maybe we're feeling very inspired by.
Yeah, you're giving off those vibes.
I give off a lot of vibes.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Women just run sometimes.
They run, Marci, as fast and as furious as they can to get away.
Yes, goodness gracious. Well, we do have a topic tonight, though, that's not Halloween, and it is SafP.
SafP. But before we dive into that, when you see it says up there Facebook user, that's from the Private Lioness group, and I can tell you who that is. That's Lauren Johnson.
Oh, yes. She's always coming in with the good advice. So this says Gerald Ray, but I just want you to know it's my mama, and so she's here. I just want to shout out to Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Thanks for tuning in, Mom. And so Lauren's giving us advice about our new intro. If you guys missed the intro, I want to play it again, but I'm not going to. But because I did work on it. I did work on it, but she's saying it needs to say, meet us back here at the rec yard next week. And that's cute. The end line should be, meet us back here at the rec yard. And we do want to see you guys back on the rec yard next week too. Mm-hmm. We will be here. We have lots of regulars tuning in, and I see some new names also. Carrie, and we're just so glad to have you all. Thanks. Justin's on here. We're so happy to see you guys. So SafP.
SafP. So tell people, do you know what the acronym stands for?
Substance Abuse Felony Punishment. felony program.
I think it's program. It
I
may be
think it's
punishment, though.
punishment.
It's
I'm
punishment.
I'm Googling it right now because I don't really trust you.
Very few people do, honey.
Maybe punishment
The
program.
Republicans don't even trust us to make an emergency exit plan when there's a fire in the prison. So,
Oh, eek! That was like right to the heart. Shaquille says substance abuse felony punishment
you got it.
facility.
Yep.
She's on it.
She's on top of her game. Thank you, Miss Oatmeal. So that's for probationers. Now, for those of us who are already incarcerated, it's our parole answer. It is called ITPC, which is in
Prison treatment.
IPTC, in prison treat.
In prison treatment. Did you do your homework?
Honey, I told you I've been geeked out on painkillers all day because I leaned down to goose the cat and I threw my back out.
And that's what you get. You're trying to do too much, honestly.
So I'm sitting in this chair right now in a lot of pain.
Inmate treatment.
No, it's not inmate. I know it's
in
not.
prison treatment.
Therapeutic community.
Yes.
Nailed it.
In prison therapeutic community. That's exactly what it is. But
it.
It's the programs are identical.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
So even though that second one doesn't have the word substance abuse in it, it is still very much focused around substance abuse. It is given as a parole answer, and it's in Texas. It's a FI-5. It's given as a parole answer. It was my parole answer.
It was mine too.
Yes, it's kind of a lot about money, that parole answer, honestly. And I'll just give you an example. My girlfriend, Brittany, her and I were incarcerated together. She has multiple drug charges, a very big drug history. I have 0 drug charges, 0 drug history. I mean, I've smoked pot like 2 times in my life. And honestly, if you want to know, I liked it. I was just kind of scared because I'm divorced with kids and I didn't want that to get in the way, right? It's illegal in Texas and all of that. So, but that's my drug history. And I didn't have a problem, like an alcoholic problem or anything like that. No kind of prescription pills, nothing like that. We both see parole at the same time. The board votes on both of us at the same time. She gets an FI-1, which means she goes home 30 to 45 days, and they send me to a drug program. It's essentially a drug program. So when you question that, the state or the agency, TDCJ staff, they like to say, well, it's about behavior modification.
Right.
It's not necessarily a substance abuse program. However, Toonche, when I got there, you do an intake because they assign you a substance abuse counselor.
Right.
And she's doing my intake, and I'm just being straight with her. Yes, I took lots of money. Yes, it was multiple transactions, and then we get to the substance part, and she's like, well, how many times have you used this? And it's like through every single drug you can imagine and all of that. And I'm like, well, I've just what I've told you guys, what my history was. And she says, why are you here?
Right.
I said, that's a great question.
What are you doing here?
Question.
Well, the second time, Marci, now the first time I was locked up, I did 10 on a 20, made my first parole. Unheard of, right? Had a very sympathetic parole panel that had worked with kids before, so really sympathetic to, I was a child. But the second time I got locked up, I knew, oh my God, they are going to make me do this the rest of I had a 10 left and then a 12 on top of that, and it run concurrent. But I was like, there's no way they're going to let me make parole. I mean, I've already made parole once. They gave me a chance. I know how their mindset is. And what's going to be helpful to me. So, baby, when I went through intake, I told them I was a stumbling down drunk. And I'm not saying that I didn't have a problem with alcohol the last year I was locked up. I did, but the alcohol was a symptom of the personality disorder symptoms, right? But I knew that they hand out that SafP, that FI5 like candy, right? Like I mean, if they can get you into that, they're going to get you into that. And I thought I had a better chance. No, ma'am, I didn't. So I did almost the whole 12 years. I did about almost 10 years on the 12, and then I get the FI5, which is a 6 months stay at the program, and then another 3 months of aftercare. And yeah, that's what they told me too. When they were asking me, well, how much did you drink in this, and I'm like, well, and they're like, well, you don't really have a severe substance use problem, but this is behavior modification. So tell people what behavior modification is, because they're going to want to know what type of therapy we're talking about. This was also the therapy back in the 90s that they gave us as children.
This was snitch camp. It was holding your peers accountable for their actions. That's basically the core value taught there, and the basis off of all of their programming is it's snitch camp, to tell on anyone for any minor infraction.
Yeah, everything is designed to use fear-based, punishment-based, shame-based behavior modification, right? Like in ways to shape your behavior through the lens of holding one another accountable. And one of the things that we used to say is, I have to learn to hold myself accountable, and not through shame, and not through guilt, and not through, you don't spend all day in your neighborhood reporting people to the police for every, or you report them to the neighborhood watch because they've got too many something in their yard they're not supposed to. Like, this is how strict that type of thinking was. And it was a nightmare. So, Marci, which one were you at? You were at Halbert? Were you
I
at
was at
Halbert?
Henley.
Oh, you were at Henley too with
I
me.
was,
Oh, Jesus.
but it was COVID time.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother thing. We were getting this program that would require us to go to a whole nother facility and be exposed and bring germs and all of that in the middle of the pandemic. So, number one, it took forever to pull chain.
Mm-hmm.
We had to wait forever because if your dorm was on lockdown, or they had a dorm that was on lockdown, or it took. So you get your parole answer. This is how. Let me paint the scene. Like, you get the parole. Marci, you made parole. Oh, I can't believe I made parole. What is it? It's an FI5 SafP. Oh shit. Well, I'm not coming home this year. That's you made parole, but you're not going home right now. It's a whole process. So we get over there, and yeah, when we finally got down there, they were locked down. The counselors weren't coming in the dorm. They were shooting paperwork underneath the door. And we actually, for a short time, we had like a SafP professional. It was like her third or fourth time.
Oh, you mean
And
the person locked up? Yeah.
right. Yes. A girl locked up with us. And it was her third or fourth time. And she knew, man, she knew everything. So she would get that paperwork, and we were getting up and getting in a circle on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little absurd. Like, I'm just going to admit it, that I was just going with it at first. And then, me, I'm like, wait, just hold the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is not required. But then what happened was, because it's a snitch camp, those of us who were like, all right, this is getting a little ridiculous. Like, what are we doing here? And then we were getting told on.
Mm-hmm.
So then the counselors are like sending notes to us because or talking through the door, like it was a glass door. And we're talking through the door because it's COVID and they don't want germs and we don't want free world germs and all of that. And they're trying to coach us. It was ridiculous. And, there's a whole thing, like there's a whole MTC, which is who facilitates that SafP programming. They ended up, I don't know if it's the legalities of it, but basically they billed TDCJ, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, a lot of money
for services that they weren't giving y'all during COVID or when we were there. So when I got shipped to Henley, what was that? I got out December, Taylor's birthday, right? That was 2018. Yep, I did it. Count it, y'all. That's one reference. So I was there from like June to December of 2018, right? And for half of the time, the staff did just what you said. Here's paper. We're not even coming in there. It was just like they were getting away with providing the most piss poor services to begin with in billing. They wouldn't come in. They'd write something on the board and walk off. So in this dorm, which is very different than how me and Marci did the bulk of our time, right? Is that there is a president of the dorm, there's the leader of the dorm, and we're supposed to guide and lead each other as a community, right? And then every hour on the hour, we would have group. Girl, God, bless my soul. We would get up, we already get up early there anyway. And it immediately, this stuff is like almost, if y'all can imagine, like some military boot camp stuff mixed in with some weird cult stuff, mixed in with some prison stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we would get up early in the morning. These were bunk beds, which, by the way, I don't know how many times you saw people fucking land on the floor, because those guards at Henley were the worst officers I have ever encountered in 20 years. So we get up and it's morning. It is group from morning until it's time to turn the lights off. You might get 1 hour of free time, and it is back to back groups. You can't lay down, you can't sit down, and you're in your little chair. They're in rows in the day room, and you're sitting there, and you've got to sign in each group, and it's the same groups over and over. But that morning group and the people incarcerated lead it. And I am not a morning person. I don't know about you, but I'm not. Don't fuck with me. Don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Let me get my coffee. Let me get settled. But I'm doing it. Here's the singing. Y'all, because there's singing, there's chanting, there's all this crazy shit happening. So here I am getting into that little circle, right? All right, everybody. And so this one person stands in the middle of the day room and is screaming and singing at the top of her lungs. Did y'all do that?
We did not do that.
Okay. So imagine you're sitting around that day room in the dorm at Henley. And it was hot as fuck because there's no air conditioning in this, at this unit. And it's like I said the other day, people were just like, because it was just so hot, you can't process anything anyway. But so she's standing there. All right, everybody. Motivate your mind. Get yourself together. Jennifer, I'm going to drop a slip on you if you do not participate. So here I am. Motivate your mind. Get yourself together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Woo! And it's like, I'm fixing to get another charge if you don't get out of my face screaming. And it was like, this is to teach y'all discipline to get up and make your beds and get motivated for the day. Okay, well, I don't get motivated like this. This actually irritates the fuck out of me. It was just set my day off every day, Marci. And it was just those back-to-back groups, with every once in a while going to see your counselor in the other building. So you may have lucked out a little bit in having not to do all the...
So some of those songs, some of the other dorms did participate in those kind of songs, because we would hear them and we'd be like, what the heck? But we didn't. And like I said, we were shut down. So it really wasn't required. speaking, and Melanie says it sounds like military style, but there you actually do sing cadences
Mm-hmm.
to and from chow or wherever you might be going as a dorm. And I remember there's a SafP program at Huckleberry, Huckberry,
Hackberry.
Hackberry
Uh-huh.
at Hackberry in Gatesville, and we worked the host squad. And yeah, we worked the host squad right across for them, and we would hear them chanting. And I started wishing for no safe P then.
Yeah.
And it was probably 2 years into my sentence. I was like, man, I hope whatever happens, I don't get safe P.
Were you I mean, it was right when I first got there that they finally allowed us to keep all of our property when we got there, because previously you couldn't have any of your property for 30 days, which means no coffee, no, just basic bare hygiene stuff. And even the commissary, you weren't allowed to buy coffee. It was like, this is an addiction. And it's like, oh my Jesus, God, help me get through this, Lord. Now, we did have one counselor that he taught cognitive intervention, which was really helpful for me in my disorder, in learning thinking errors and like really structured ways of thinking that's unhealthy, right? But if it hadn't been for him as a person, I mean, I wouldn't have got anything out of that. It was an absolute nightmare. And you may have heard this. You may have heard this statistic while you're there. I don't know. But they told us a lot. I want you girls to look around the room. There's 30 of you women in here. 3 of you are going to stay sober and out of prison.
Yes.
Think about that. And everybody looked around, and we were just sitting there during count one time. And somebody said, man, only 3 of us? Man, fuck this shit. And I said, no. I said, there's nothing wrong with us. There's something wrong with their program. Because if this was a business model, they would be completely bankrupt. It's not
Right.
us. It's the program. Something's not working here. It's not that we're irredeemable. And girl, it used to make me so angry. Did they ever tell y'all that?
Oh yes, that definitely happened. And it wasn't just a counselor situation. That was kind of thrown at us by staff.
Mm-hmm.
Like we weren't worth much more than that, and we weren't really maybe worth the investment, or yeah.
Wait, hey, I got to ask you, just because there's some people watching that probably went to Henley.
Okay.
Um, was what were the worst? Do you remember the officers there that were the worst? There was 2 women in particular that were really horrid to us officers. I want to see if they were there a year later when you got there. There was Miss Bell.
Oh yes.
Oh my God.
Hey, man, you're saying names and all, but I want to tell you something about Miss Bell.
Tell me.
My first encounter with her, she was a seasoned correctional officer. And I'm not ever one to run to correctional officers' defense. I'm not. I'm not that girl, Toonche, But she had seen enough things
Mm-hmm.
that she was calloused
Yeah.
and abrasive. She was one of those aggressive officers. When we would go to chow and she was working the chow hall, you weren't going to finish your meal
Yeah.
because you were, close to the time that you sat down is when you're getting up. But I ended up working for her some
Mm-hmm.
while I was at Henley. And I got to learn that a little bit. She's retired now, so I can just say, because she was retiring that next year after I got out. I got to learn some personal things about her and some things in her life that kind of made her that way,
Mm-hmm.
Toonche. And in the same way, circumstances happen, I think, that bring people honestly into our criminal justice system. The same thing, circumstances can make officers have those calloused hearts and feelings and abrasive behavior. And I'm not condoning it. It's not appropriate. Certainly not professional. But yes, she was scary. She was scary.
Yeah. Yeah,
She
her
was.
and Miss Santos. Her name was Miss.
Oh, Miss Santos was there.
You already know
Yeah.
that is one. I'm gonna say the top three female officers that were the most nasty, vicious, hateful, mean, atrocious human beings that I've encountered. I'm sorry, and I don't. I normally try to be a little bit gentle when it comes to saying people's names on here, but she was that bad. She was that bad.
There was
Bad.
another lady, I want to say her name was Miss Sanders, but I couldn't promise it. She was in, and I say older, and I really what I mean is my age older, white lady. I don't know if you remember her. She was very abrasive too. It's really interesting in that program, because it is more boot camp ish kind of a feel, compared just to being in prison, that some of those officers kind of took on that role,
Hmm.
when really, when it boils down to it, they're still security.
Right.
And there's no reason for security to dehumanize the people living in the place where they're supposed to be keeping it secure. They
Yeah.
weren't the counselor or therapist, or they weren't running the program. And so it was. I also had my absolute favorite officer that I ever encountered, was one of my other bosses while I was there at Henley, and he is still at working there. But I'll tell you, he, helped me, in the anxiety of knowing I was going home after being incarcerated for so long, and my concerns about my new role as a free world mom and free world daughter, and all of that. I worked and I didn't stop working, but he let me vocalize all of that while I was at work. And he was just a complete sounding board. He didn't cross any professional barriers or lines. But I wanted to say, Justin Smith is on here, and he says that he worked at Hackberry, not Huckleberry, and how he's noticing so many differences between units, and that we find that in everything.
Oh yeah, because the girls, when they would tell me when I got to my halfway house, because after Henley, after SafP, you have to go to a halfway house unless you've got all this rigmarole set up with your family, and they've got to go through all these hoops. So it's just easier to go to the halfway house. Um, they were telling me about, well, I went to SafP at Hackberry, or at what was the other one? I can't. I thought you went to it, but very different. Like they would get programmatically, they would get real consequences and lose their. So they were like sitting in what we called chairs, and so if everybody got in trouble, or maybe one or two people in the group got in trouble, the whole dorm gets in trouble. And so they would put them in chairs, where they would sit in chairs and have to stare at the wall and not talk for 8 hours. Or they'd be on no talking bans, and they weren't allowed to speak to anybody for 3 or 4 days. And so this weird programmatic stuff that we had to put up with at Henley, but for the most part, ours was the problems was the chaos of the unit, of the staff, of the security. Our program people didn't do anything really most of the time, but at other units they took their program even more seriously, and these women would get major cases for that petty stuff that we talk about women getting in trouble for. They would get major cases for it and lose their answers. So, and they'd go back to the unit, and they lost their parole. And so was my concern when I went to SafP, and then I got to Henley and saw how ghetto-tastic, crazy, and out of control that unit was, and how much the programmatic side didn't care. At least because girls would get in trouble all the time, and nobody ever got their answer taken from them there.
See, I saw people getting their answer taken during my time.
Well, I remember somebody did for fighting or and having sex, but I don't remember like programmatic stuff.
For I don't remember program
Like
wise
not
either.
participating,
But that fear was there that
oh
it
yeah.
could happen. And so even when another inmate or person that's in white or incarcerated person is giving directives, It's set up so that they do have an authority. I mean, it's set up that that there's a hierarchy there, and you're supposed to listen, and that can be tricky, very tricky. You talked about having to be punished by being on a no talk for days. And Brittany, my girlfriend, she had been to SafP in her prior incarceration. I don't even remember if it was a maybe probation SafP thing, but she went to Henley also years ago, and she was on that ban all the time. Anytime they saw her, because she looks masculine and she's obviously lesbian, anytime they saw her speaking to anybody that was not masculine, they put her on a no talking ban, and it was her peers running her in.
Yeah.
It wasn't staff, it came from her peers.
We should talk, we should demonstrate. I really want to demonstrate this to people, because it is the number one group that everybody avoids, and it's the number one group that you can't get out of, right? But they try desperately to get out. Oh, I got to go to work. I can't be in this group. And it was like, you do not get a pass for missing encounters. It is the crux jewel of the behavior modification program. And it was this way in TYC. And Marci, you know the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid at TYC. This was the type of treatment that we went through, behavior modification. So all this stuff is triggered. Like, I hadn't been through any of this stuff since I was like a kid. So they're doing all this, and I'm like, I am like freaking out and having panic attacks. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And then I realized, oh God, this is the shit that we had to do when we were kids. So let's do an encounter. How many prisons are there in Texas, women's prisons?
There's a lot. And why do we not know this number?
Gosh,
I get asked it often enough, but for sure. So Plain State, Lockhart, San Saba, and then in Gatesville, we have the Crane units, Lane Murray, Mountain View,
Hilltop.
So, and that's 7, but the Crane actually has satellites. So it has little prisons, several
little units within their umbrella. So
it's a lot. There's 9,000 women incarcerated in Texas. So I did want to say that.
Yes.
So the encounter group.
So the encounter.
Yeah. First of all, throughout the week, you are required to drop slips. Your counselor, part of your program, she says, I want you to drop X amount of slips, 3, 5, 7, whatever she says, on people. And that means you're going to write a piece of paper that says, I saw Toonche, take a sip of Coke when we were in group and we weren't supposed to have anything to drink,
right?
Or whatever. I saw Toonche get in the shower after the showers were closed. I saw Toonche not make her bed up, or whatever the case may be. It was always something really silly. It was rarely for something real, because frankly, we were all, especially on our side, we had just made parole.
Right.
We're trying to go home. Like, we're not doing anything. So, that's how it starts. And then you're in the encounter group.
Right. So you can imagine you've got 30 women. So we've all dropped our slips. We all have to drop a certain amount of slips that we've been holding people accountable, right? Now, eventually we all discover, hey, we need to write each other up. Hey, I'm going to write you up for this. You write me up for that. Like, we need to protect each other. Don't fucking write me up for something real. Like, man, there were people in our dorm that were having sex or trafficking, trading, or eating and cooking together. Like, it was this, this understanding that we're not going to put each other on blast for real stuff. Now, it did happen when people got into it with each other. And those were, I'd be sitting there, Marci, with my hands in my lap, and I'd lean over to my neighbor. I'd say, ooh, girl, get the popcorn, because that's a real encounter slip. But most of the time it was stuff that was petty so that we could just get through it and mark the box off. But even when it was just petty stuff, people got so anxious because it is that I think the intention of encounters in this type of therapy, at least this part of it, is to try to teach people how to have healthy conflict and conflict resolution, and to be able to like really look at why the things that are bought, like if Marci did something and it triggered me so badly, it's not Marci, it's me. It's and that's what the core that, but it wasn't ever done right. The counselor never ever did it right. So this is what would happen. Everybody would be in the day room and they'd be sitting in one big circle. And then there would be an inner circle of about, I don't know, I think it was about 12 chairs, maybe fewer, maybe 6. And it was kind of like a rectangle, because at the head would be the person that's getting confronted. And then over here is the person that dropped the slip. And the counselor is walking around. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I'll do it right now. Okay, so the inner circle is the one that will ask questions, almost like attorneys during court, to try to get you to be able to see the thinking error that you did. So I would be there looking at Marci at the other end, and we all have to sit 5-0. Put your keys down. Mm-hmm. If you've got your key in your pocket, nothing in your hand that you could stab somebody with. Hello, family. I'm bringing Marci to the circle today. So I saw Marci when we were on the way to Chow. She was talking when Officer Bell had given us a directive to be quiet. And under her breath, she said, "I don't give a fuck." She was also using profanity. And I asked her in line to please check her behavior. And she said that I could also go fuck myself. Like a lot of times we would do this and just like inwardly be laughing, but sometimes people were actually, mad, right?
But you can't laugh.
You can't.
Because that's a huge infraction.
Honey, I got in trouble a lot.
Yeah. So I would have to say thank you, Toonche, for bringing that to light, to my attention. I'm sorry, family.
Mm-hmm. And I would say this reminds me of the times that I would tell my brother to be quiet and my dad would beat us because he wouldn't be quiet. Right. And then Marci, says, thank you, sister. Remember?
Yes, you're right. Thank you, sister.
Thank you, sister, for bringing this to my attention. And then we'd open it up for the inner circle. So then one of the people in the inner circle would say, I put my quote, you remember we used to do that Marci, what were you thinking when you said that you didn't give a fuck? What were you thinking?
I think I wasn't thinking. I think I was just frustrated because it was 110 degrees outside and I was walking in the heat and trying to get to the chow hall.
So then someone else would say, Marci, I heard you just say, what I heard you just say was that you weren't thinking at all. Okay. And we know that thinking error, deflection or blaming and justifying, whatever thinking error that you could use for that. Right. And I would say you are always thinking something. So something was going on in you. We are not without thoughts in our heads. So you're not being open and you're not being receptive. So can you please tell the group what you were thinking when you said that?
You're giving me flashbacks. You're mean, Toonche, and you probably dropped a lot of slips.
No, ma'am, I did not. The slips I dropped were on myself and other people's names. I dropped them. Toon, I'm bringing you to the circle because I had this pimple on my forehead and you said I look like a unicorn. It was so big and it hurt my feelings. I did that one time and I got called to the circle for it. And that was a real one because I was just joking. And I told her, I said, I was just joking. And baby, they nailed me. They railed into me. And you know me, I'm just going to continue to slip by it. I'm not going to accept responsibility for
You're
it.
going to slide right under the radar. Meanwhile, I'm going to get into it with the head incarcerated person who's trying to run the program during COVID when we haven't been instructed to do anything but read our paperwork.
Yeah, but
You're gonna be sliding right under the radar. The laws don't even know your name probably at Henley, and I'm getting called to the
well,
counselor's office.
but let me tell you something though, Marcy. That whole thing about me looking butch, even though we all know I'm a soft butch and I like Taylor Swift and cats and I cry a lot. So I'm not a hard butch. I'm not a stone butch. Um, but in their eyes, I've got short hair and I hang out and make girls laugh. So I must be some type of apex predator. I don't know. But there was a girl that we were getting in line, and baby, I couldn't, life at Lane Murray, at Mountain View, at Crane, you don't tolerate people. You just don't tolerate people's bullshit. And there were a lot of people that were there that almost felt like, they had done 2 months at Marlin or 2 months at Lane Murray. And I mean, they still had that mindset of county jail, so they're talking shit and well, don't tell me. And I'm like, I cussed this girl out and I went to go get in the shower. And my friends from Mountain View, they were like, she called you a doc or whatever. And I said, well, I cussed her out or whatever. Well, everybody went to chow. And the officers are not in the dorm. And so I don't know if I think she was at Lane Murray, but her name was Lindsay. And she went and closed those two doors. Okay. She just went and closed them. And that girl was over there on her bunk, and there was only a handful of us in the dorm. She closed the door, and I'm in that little shower, that nasty little fucking shower. And I hear, and I said, what the hell is going on? I come out, and they have drugged this girl down the aisle and beat her ass. And and what did she do? She ran. As soon as she got up, she ran straight to that door, went out, and was banging on the door where the officers were and so they took her out, and the sergeant came, the lieutenant came in there. Everybody, show me your hands. And they moved me because they believed it was me that beat her up. And I'm like, I know you maybe looked at my charges and you think that was me that beat her up, but it was these three sweet looking feminine girls that, didn't like what she said to me, that were, that's how we rolled on the bigger units. You don't do that. But I got the brunt of it because of the way I looked, and they thought it was me, and I almost got a major case. And it was like, they couldn't prove it. Well, they kept threatening us, and I'm like, no, TDCJ policy. No, sir. You don't do 20 years, and then you're going to tell me you're going to write me a major case for some shit you didn't see. But
if an officer didn't see it and a camera didn't see it, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. But now so that was the one time that they thought that I was. Anytime I got moved to a new unit, they did that to me. And then if I was there long enough, they're like, oh,
that's just Toonche. Leave her alone.
That's just Toonche. But yeah, but those encounter circles, and this would go on for an hour. It would go on for an hour, and everybody hated them. I kind of enjoyed them because I thought they were interesting, because I don't have a problem with conflict. I don't care. So what? Well, bring it. What question are you going to ask me? I'm just going to throw some different logic at you. Try to pin me. I always saw it as like this intellectual wrestling match, but the girls would just break out in sweats. Marcy, you already know women aren't.
Yeah, it would get, and if it was a real encounter, if it was something that somebody really felt ugly about and was trying to call somebody else out on, it got heated. I mean, that's why you had to have your hands open palm on your lap, because they wanted to see your hands and that they were empty, that you didn't have a weapon in it, because that's how heated things got. And so what was the resolution? Like, what did you get out of those groups? Entertainment?
Oh, for me, I did at least look at it. I try to pull nuggets of gold and wisdom out of the horrible things I've been through, but I was looking at it as, well, they kind of have a point here. Like, the whole point of this is being able to confront somebody when they've done something that bothers, real things. I understood the difference between this is bullshit, but like if this was something serious. And then having that piece where you say, and this reminded me of a time. And so it really got me to look at the things I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at what this reminds me of. And maybe you did do something that was fucked up, but this is more about me and my thinking. And then to be able to piece apart, and I would watch people and I would listen to them defend themselves, and I could see the errors. I could see the thinking errors, the blaming, the justifying, and you could see people's resistance to accountability. And so I thought that was interesting, and it helped me in my own journey to be able to look at the ways that I think. But for the most part, because they didn't do the group right, it was always just either joking around, laughing. What could we say that was the funniest thing to get us through? Or those times that people, man, one time this girl said, I told the girl that was the dorm president, I said, honey, leave that girl that got beat up. I said, leave her alone because she's got a mouth on her. And well, I need to hold her accountable. But I said, bitch, you can't hold nobody accountable. You're having sex in the bathroom. You don't get to hold anybody accountable about anything. I said, because see, you haven't done real time. The first time you open your mouth about something, they're gonna go for the jugular, and it's gonna be that and your little girlfriend. And she didn't listen to me, Marcy. And she called this girl to the encounter circle. And that girl sat there and she said, well, that's weird coming from you, seeing how you just got your stuff in the bathroom last. We all said, dang.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it turned in this whole, had to get between them. They were fixing to fight and all this other stuff. It does get heated.
It absolutely does. You know what I was thinking about, the criminal addictive cycle. Did you guys do that? Where you had
yes.
to?
Yeah, where you have to think through every step.
Yes, yes. And that was we had to do one of those. I want to say every day we had to have one
Yes,
filled
we
out.
did.
And so you had to think of, I mean, unless you just really committed a lot of real crimes, and some people that's the case before they came to terms with what they wanted to be in life or whatever. But if you only just had a handful, you had to start digging, because what it is you have to pick something that you did, a crime or something against the rules, or I mean just something you were ashamed of. And so then you're just really having to dig into that, and just kind of the idea of thinking about those things, like digging into past, okay, I took a bunch of money and I know all the consequence. Like I could do that cycle 1,000 times, what it did to my family, just the whole thing. I could do that in my head 1,000 times. But when you start digging into, oh, but when I hung up on so and so on the phone because they made me mad, like that's something you could work through. And it started making me look at maybe smaller things. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, yeah, because we did have to do that damn
Criminal addictive
cycle.
cycle.
Yes. So and so the build up, and then the ways you start justifying right before you do it. You immediately, and I was like, damn, I did. Like
Right.
so kind of you start preparing yourself to why you're right in doing this thing. But you're right. It's like there is a part of that became so redundant that now it's losing power because I'm just making up shit to turn in, because this is just get y'all out. If the things that were impactful about that program, which was the cognitive intervention stuff, which is what the part of the cycle thing is, and the encounters, if it could have just really only been that in a group setting that was healthy, and not 130 degrees, and not with screaming officers terrorizing you in ways of just were horrific.
Well, if the fear was taken out,
Right. Yeah.
if the fear of losing your parole answer, the fear of getting a frivolous case from an officer, the fear of getting talked down to, because even though people think, oh, you words don't hurt or whatever, they absolutely do. So when somebody comes at you aggressively or in an inhumane way or disrespectful way, and they're in complete authority, that just makes it that much more harsh, right?
Yeah.
So what I love is how we as people can decide when we're put in the most crummy situations. We can still pull, just like you said, those little nuggets, and we can still learn. We can still get something from it, even if it's forced. All of these forced classes I had to do after prison as a result of SafP, which we definitely need to get to. And I want to answer this question. I'm going to come back to it about 3 positive things that we had in prison. But that, yeah, I mean, that's a part of the SafP too. It doesn't just end there. You're not just finished with the program. Then you have to go to a halfway house. And then that's a therapeutic community there. And so you're there. And then from the halfway house, when you go home, you have aftercare. And now you're going to these classes. And for me, it was 100% substance abuse classes and AA meetings. And I have no history of that.
Yeah.
But here I am. What can I learn from it? What can I hold on to it? What can I bring to other aspects of my life? What can help me have an understanding for people that are in recovery? I mean,
Yeah, because at least through the steps, once you got to the halfway house and then to the aftercare in your community, you do start to get more of the therapeutic stuff without the fear and the prison and all that. Now, I mean, you're going to get in trouble with your parole officer if you don't go to those meetings, right? Especially being on that monitor. But I will say, I'm really glad that I had that, because I was in a bad place in my head, in a living situation with my parents. It was, I thought, oh, in SafeP, when they were like, well, even family will be a trigger, and I'm like, oh, my parents are little quiet old people, there's no drugs and no this. I thought, and they would tell me this has nothing to do with that. It still can be triggering in the ways that are triggering for you. And I was really grateful that I had the counselor that I had in my aftercare, and the one at the halfway house. The halfway house was trash, right, in Beaumont. It was absolute garbage. The staff stole our food. I was hungry a lot because I couldn't leave. And Jennifer's not on here, but she used to bring me food back from Subway against the rules, because they would steal our food. They would come drop off food, TDCJ budget, fill up the pantry. We'd spend all day packing that food in there. And 2 days later, we'd go in there, it'd all be gone, because they would put it in their car and take it home. But I did have a counselor there and in aftercare that was a real counselor to me, and really helped me with the cognitive things that I needed, because I didn't have the problems with substances that the other ladies did. In AA, I had to go 3 times a week, and I learned listening to people, that those thinking things, like really just challenging the way I think about stuff. And I did learn some things. So that part was useful.
going to an AA meeting when you're not a drinker, that it's a little bit you want to have a drink when you leave those meetings. Sometimes it's harsh. That's tough. And I think, a lot of people use AA for their sobriety. And I mean, they have a track record that I'm just saying, but golly, man, those meetings were rough. They were rough. I was so glad when that part of my parole stipulation was up, when that box was checked and I was done with that, because they were rough.
Well, one of the things that I remember, Marci, is that the girls at Henley, that it was beaten into our head that abstinence and AA and those groups were gold.
Mm-hmm.
You had to. And a lot of times the women would say, this doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable with it. And this is not what works for me. And so when I took the training to be a recovery coach with substance use, wow, some people abstinence doesn't work for them, and they do harm, mitigation. They do harm reduction, and they may not use heroin anymore, but they may drink a lot. They kind of change one vice for another that's not as harmful, and that works for them, and they have successful lives. And I'm like, well, damn, Well, no wonder that program didn't have the success that it wanted to, because it tried to squeeze everybody into a certain type of treatment that doesn't work for everybody.
And just like you said, with everything in life, everybody's so different between the way we learn, the way we heal, the way we process. You can't just funnel everybody in one direction. So we're having some good feedback here. So Diane, she went to SafP in the mid 90s. I think she said 94. And she's comparing, and like it hasn't changed much because she's been talking in these comments like that. Yes, that's how it was. That's, I remember. And she talked about being in the middle of the encounter circle. And yeah, so that was pretty interesting that it hasn't progressed much.
Right. Well, and if we're using just one model of care, well, going on 30 years later, if the statistics, and the statistics do show that not very many people are successful after having been through SafP and ITPC. And again, I go back to the research that the Texas Center for Justice and Equity did about SafP, and that it shows that. And so maybe we need to do something different, and maybe embrace the things that are working in other areas.
Well, and just Justin Martinez coming in hot, always with
Coming in
the
hot.
facts. I just love Justin because he's so educated with statistics and the actual facts, but then just has a heart for restorative justice. And he says they don't do anything to help with the larger structural and systematic failures that can lead people to use substances. And I think that that's kind of the core to the problem with our entire legal system in this country is it's reactive.
Mm-hmm.
It's all reactive. Oh, she did this, well now we have to do this. It's crime and punishment. It's not, oh, we have this 5-year-old little girl who's growing up in poverty and getting touched by her dad every day. Let's do something here.
Right.
It's not there.
Right.
They wait until this young lady grows up and then starts self-medicating with substances and then starts having to deal with all of her mental health issues caused by her childhood trauma. And then she gets into a lifestyle that causes her to land in prison. And now we want to do something. Well, let's put our resources on the forefront.
Yeah. Well, and just think how useful the good things about this program would have been without the fear-based shit, and been offered at the beginning of our incarceration, where we could really have processed this stuff instead of me worrying about, well, I don't know where I'm going to live or have a job. And now you're wanting me to reflect on all this. I can't, I don't have time for it. I can't. My brain can only hold so many intense emergency things at once. So yeah, and two, criminalizing addiction. Do most of those women that we were there with that had substance use disorders, their crimes were really crimes of addiction, and they shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the truth. Toonche, we only have a couple more minutes before the hour. You guys, are there any more questions you want to ask? I want to answer this one.
You didn't sing, Marci. You didn't sing any SafP songs. I sang.
Well, do you want a gold sticker, Toonche? Do you want a pat on the back?
I told everybody, I got everybody here tonight based on Marci's going to sing.
They are here tonight to learn about SafP and to hang out on the rec yard because we have ugly law in there and we don't want to be inside getting yelled at. That's why we're here on the rec yard. You made
Why are we
promises.
Why are we here?
I don't know that.
Wait, that was the thing that they made us chant at the end of group.
Oh, we did do that.
Yeah, so the counselor would end and say, okay, everybody, why are we here? And we'd all stand up. We are here to end the running and hiding from ourselves.
Yes,
right?
It was a whole thing.
Yeah.
And you're right. I remember that. And we did that sadly on our own without a counselor.
It was brainwash stuff. And
You
it goes to that weird place of fear does not motivate people for change. Only positive goals motivate people to really change. And I heard it all the time the 6 months. Well, do you want to end up back here? Well, bitch, I didn't want to end up back here the second time I came. I
know?
didn't want to. I didn't want to the first time. Fear doesn't motivate people. Only positive, healthy goals do. Please go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay, because then I was also thinking about, you want to go back to where you came from, meaning back to the prison unit. Well,
Sometimes I
no.
was like, yes.
But and there were moments in there, because the thing is, during that time in your incarceration, when you've already done your sentence and now you're here, your mind is going crazy thinking about, yes, where am I going to live? Where am I going to work? Who's going to hire me? How's it going to be when I go back home? Who's picking me up? Because some people didn't know who could pick them up from the halfway house. I mean,
Yeah.
these are real life concerns, how people are going to survive. And we're getting yelled at. And that's when that time in your life, that's when they want to say, okay, now we're going to fix you.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. Okay, top 3 moments in prison. At least 2, because we're short on time.
Honey, there's an ICS. Okay, so they're not going to get us off the rec yard anytime soon. Okay. So the count hadn't cleared, and so we're not
Okay.
going anywhere. And if you need
Okay.
to go to the bathroom, you're just going to have to hold it.
So we don't have to rush.
We don't have to rush.
I'll go first with
You do it.
one.
Okay, do
For
it.
sure, and it wasn't so much like one moment, but for sure on the rec yard, playing volleyball in F dorm on the Dr. Lane Murray unit. That was the only rec yard that was large enough to have a good volleyball game where the volleyball didn't end up in the razor wire all the time. So, and we played hard. We played hard out there, and that doing that physical exercise as a community with the ladies, taking your mind off of your incarceration, off of all of the things that come with being in prison and being incarcerated. That was it for me, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? Like the positive things that I remember and that I think about a lot and I miss a lot. People are like, "You miss prison?" No, I miss y'all. You know what I mean? Like we did have positive things that would happen. Not very often, but we would make the best of what we had. We had our volleyball and softball tournaments, and that was a big deal. I know, Marcy, I know you're frustrated that Mountain View had a bit more
Yeah,
support.
you were on cookie camp having softball tournaments.
Now,
We were not having softball tournaments.
those things came at a price though, because when people acted out, it was bad. It was bad. So let us have our volleyball tournament, okay? Teaching peer education, I really enjoyed that because when I got out the first time, I worked at AIDS Foundation Houston, and I would go back in and train people. I really love public health education, so that gave me a lot. And the library, just doing all the stuff, it made me feel like a person. It made me feel like I was really at work, and it made me feel like the things that I was doing on the unit mattered in terms of educating people, sticking up for people when shit went bad. So I think it was just whatever group activities we could do with each other, even if it was in the dorm celebrating my birthday. We watched Footloose and Hunger Games and had tamales. Some of my best birthdays, a lot of them were there, but some of my best ones were really honestly in that day room. So
Same. That's the same. There's something to say about being around that sisterhood of women that are all in the same place and the same mindset. We're struggling the same, finding joy and friendship with one another. That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. And so I don't have to say, but I definitely better mention my girlfriend, because we did meet in prison. And we
it better be
definitely,
the top one,
yes,
Marcy.
that's I was working up to my number one,
Oh,
Brittany, if
okay.
you watch this later. Um, so there is one thing. if I saw Toonche from across the rec yard or from across the maybe chow hall, and she's my friend and I care about her and I love her, I'm going to throw her a heart. So if some people, if you've been a woman in a Texas prison, you know
You
this.
know what this
And
means.
you know a big one and you know a little one,
Right.
and it's all the same, sending you love. So, Brittany, I can sometimes look at her now, and it's, we got separated. She got moved to a different unit. So it had been, 3 years before since we were together in prison now. And there's sometimes I look at her and I can see her stand way going into the J1A building or the J1 building in Lane Murray, and me way over at K2, and her just looking at me throwing a heart. And it's just that's a moment for sure that's in my mind. Like, it's just her showing me she loves me, telling me she loves me. And yeah, but for sure it's the people. Every moment we had was people.
Yeah.
Every good moment, for sure.
Yeah, I have a friend that she was at Mountain View for 20 years, and her name was Janet, but we called her J Lo, and she was a very she had her problems. Don't get me wrong, but she was a very jolly, happy, laughed all the time. She was, honey, she don't cross her though. She got that old school, like she gonna be dirty as fuck. But Janet kind of took me under her wing when I got to Mountain View because I was so depressed, Marcy. I was back in prison. I was so depressed. And she would cook, and then we'd watch scary movies on Friday night. And she passed away of COVID 2 years ago. And sometimes I'll think about her and I'll think about that time, and it's just like, I lived for those moments when I was locked up, for us to sit at the back table and write our letters and share stories, and then what are we going to cook, and then it's some raggedy old horror movie that we've all seen 30 times, and we sit up till 1 o'clock talking shit, drinking coffee, and there are times that I'm here that I do feel lonely. You're surrounded by people all the time. I don't know. I think the loneliness out here is probably on par with the loneliness, just in a different way. I certainly miss her, and all the fun shenanigans and crazy stuff we all did together to survive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Toonchi, we have to decide what we're talking about next week. And what's up? What are we doing?
Hold
So
on.
I have a friend. She just got out of prison. Maybe we could do something about getting out, challenges when you first get out. That's my idea. Do y'all have any ideas? Anybody in the chat? Toonchi, have you had been thinking about anything?
I'm sorry. I hurt my back earlier chasing the cat, and I feel like I'm sitting down, and it feels like my whole skeleton is just shoving upwards towards my brain.
Toonchi, take a deep breath.
What have I been thinking? No, I would love to. I like when everybody has ideas that are watching, because
Yeah,
that feels fun. I feel like it's
I do too. And we have
interactive.
a lot of people joined right now. Does anybody have any suggestions or something that
I
you guys
mean,
have been wanting to
something
know
you're
about?
curious about. Nothing's off limits as long as we can get away with censorship on all of our platforms. Nothing's off limits. Um,
And Lauren Johnson had mentioned pets one time, so that's an option too. Pets in prison,
we could talk
different
about
pets.
that's true. We could talk about pets. We could talk about food. We could talk about relationships. We could talk about whatever. Now everybody got quiet.
Yeah, I don't know. Toonch, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm.
Well, maybe we could do the pets. We could do, I don't know.
We could do inmate relationships.
Coming home is a great. Oh well, everybody seems to be on board with that. Okay.
And that's the biggest struggles newly released. And the reason I said that, oh, my mom coming in hot with prison family structure. We haven't really talked about that too much on here either. So that's a good idea. but we have food, cooking. So these are our options, Tooch. Prison family structure, prison cooking or food. And that might be an episode you and I need to do when we're together. We can have a cook off or something.
Oh boy,
But
because I just bought the food like Laura did. I just bought the food.
yeah, so I'll win. I love it when I know I'm going to win. Coming home, because I think my friend would join us for a little bit and we could get some insight. She's been home 1 week and she's already like hit the ground running. She's seen reentry services. She's gone to the Texas Workforce Commission, and I think she would be give us a lot of insight.
Okay.
So
I mean, I just do whatever you tell me to do.
yeah,
Let's make sure to put that comment on the screen.
well, of course. Now, if it said Toonche is an amazing presenter,
No, because
I would put it up there.
I'm not gonna let you get away with gaslighting everybody on this call. When I wanted to I made you put up the comment last week about what an amazing librarian I was, and you were like, ugh.
Well, first of all, I need it to be made very clear that you don't make me do anything, but you did
Oh, God.
urge
Here
me.
we go, because we were talking about SafP. Remember, take responsibility for your own behavior. I don't make you feel anything. You make yourself feel.
We have to go. We have to wrap this up, guys.
Okay.
Y'all have been awesome. We have sure enjoyed visiting with y'all on the Rec Yard tonight. We will be here again, same time, same place, next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on the Rec Yard Live. Listen, guys, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel,
Please subscribe to the YouTube. We continue to send it everywhere because y'all are everywhere, but we're
yes.
trying to grow the YouTube. And Marci, I need to fix our podcast stuff. So after you wave, don't just hang up on me like you normally do.
Okay, guys, we're wrapping it up. Love y'all. Love y'all.